The void stares back, they say, a writhing mass of unreality that mocks our pitiful attempts at understanding. We call it the warp. Picture a night sky, vast and uncaring. Now imagine that each pinprick of light is a nightmare, hungry and waiting. That's the warp for you, a realm that exists alongside ours. Our ancestors thought they could master it. Fools. They learned to slide their ships through its depths, skipping across light years like stones on a pond. But the pond is an ocean, and its depths teem with horrors. Time means nothing there. Laws crumble. It's a place where madness reigns and sanity is the punchline to a cosmic joke. And yet we persist in hurling ourselves into its maw, praying to false gods that we'll emerge on the other side. Sometimes we do. Sometimes the ships return, their hulls weeping with otherworldly energy, their crews babbling of impossible sights. But for every vessel that makes it back, how many are lost? How many are swallowed whole by the hungry dark? Short hops, they tell us. Keep it brief, keep it safe. As if anything about that hellscape could ever be considered safe. We dance on the edge of oblivion, and sooner or later, we're all going to fall in. The bastards who guide us through hell, they call themselves Navigators, born with a third eye that lets them stare into the abyss without going mad. Well, not completely mad anyway. Take a man who's seen things that would turn your guts to water. Now give him more power than any sane society should allow. That's a navigator for you. A mutant with delusions of nobility, guiding our ships through the nightmares between stars. They're born into it, these freaks. Raised from the cradle to think they're better than the rest of us poor sods who can't see the warp. And maybe they are. After all, they're the ones who keep us from being lost in that hellscape for eternity. They're great houses. Now there's a nest of vipers if ever there was one. They've got their tendrils in everything, from the muddiest backwater world to the gilded halls of Terra itself. Power, influence, wealth. They've got it all, and they're not shy about using it. We need them. We need these inbred, gene-twisted mutants to keep humanity from falling apart. Because without them, we're all just rats in a sinking ship, waiting for the warp to swallow us whole. And oh, does it try. The Immaterium does not understand time like we do. You might step off your ship to find your grandchildren have died of old age. Or maybe you'll arrive before you left. A walking paradox in a universe that doesn't care about logic. Sometimes the warp throws a real tantrum. Storms that can cut off entire sectors, leaving worlds to rot in isolation for years, decades, centuries. There was a time, they say, when the whole galaxy was cut off. 5,000 years of darkness, while some chaos god shat itself into existence. They've been around since before anyone can remember. A twisted branch of humanity's family tree. Some say it was the work of madmen playing at being gods. Others whisper that the Emperor himself had a hand in it. It was a time when the stars went dark and mankind tore itself apart. That's when these mutants nearly died out. Fitting, really. But like cockroaches after a fire, they survived. Came back stronger even. Makes you wonder what kind of deal with the devil they struck. When the Emperor finally got his act together, guess who came crawling out of the woodwork? The Navigators, of course, pledged their loyalty like good little dogs. And in return, they got themselves a nice, shiny charter. Legal protection, they called it. When the Emperor shook hands with the machine lovers of Mars, He had to throw in a few Navigator houses as part of the deal, like trading baseball cards, except these ones could steer ships through hell. The Navigator gene, a shadow of destiny inked into their very blood, is a recessive skein that weaves the peculiar might of the Navigators. This cursed blessing binds them to their own, for only through the insular purity of intermarriage can this trait be preserved. To mingle blood with those not of their kind is to dilute and eventually extinguish the fire of their arcane sight. Thus, the Navigator houses are bred tight, a knotwork of bloodlines that bind tighter than any chain, holding fast even as their kin wander far from the familial fold to heed their grim calling. And what do these genetic outliers get for their trouble? The ability to stare into the abyss without their brains turning to mush. Oh sure, they go mad eventually, but slowly, exquisitely. It's a cruel twist of fate, isn't it? We need these mutants to survive, to spread our cancerous empire across the stars. Without them, we'd be trapped in our own little corner of the galaxy, pissing in the wind and calling it rain. So we turn a blind eye to their perversions, to the way they twist the human form into something barely recognizable. We pretend not to notice when cousin marries cousin, when children are born with eyes that shouldn't exist, all because we're too damned scared to face the alternative. And through it all, these Navigator families cling to each other. Blood calls to blood, they say. More like mutation calls to mutation. They send their children out into the void, knowing full well the horrors they'll face. But hey, at least they've got their precious gene to keep them company. The Navigator gene does more than allow its bearers to withstand the maelstrom. It binds them to it. These cursed souls harbor an eerie kinship with the warp, wielding powers not fully grasped by the saner branches of humanity. Some can do more than merely witness the warp's madness. They can twist its streams subtly, shaping its tides and eddies, though the mechanisms of such manipulation lie cloaked in mystery. As their mastery grows, so too does their utility. Navigators, once mere guides through the cosmic tempest, now reach further, bending their talents to broader, darker purposes. This flexibility is not merely advantageous, but vital to the Imperium, as it teeters perennially on the brink of annihilation. The Navis Nobility, a grim brotherhood marred by mutation, stands in stark contrast to the puritanical dictates of the Imperium. Stories of excess, sorcery, and unspeakable power cling to them. Their damning legacy casts them into shadows, feared and shunned by the masses whose ignorance breeds distrust. To meet a Navigator's triune gaze is a fate many would flee. It strips away your sanity like peeling an orange, or so they say. Such isolation weaves a thick cloak of mystery and malevolence around the houses of the Navis Nobility, each more insular and suspicious than the last. The insidiousness of their blood, preserved through centuries of selective breeding, has wrought not just power, but perversion. Generations of Navigators bear the marks of their lineage, grotesque deformities, bizarre afflictions, and the slow creep of madness. While whispers blame the taint of inbreeding, the truth likely lies with the Navigator gene itself, a corrupting script that writes madness and mutation into their very essence as they age and as their exposure to the immaterium deepens. Imagine waking up one day to find you've sprouted an extra limb or your skin's turned inside out. Not a big deal, right? Right. And we let them guide our ships through hell. Brilliant plan, that. In the shadowed halls of the Navigator houses, a dark and delicate dance of genetics plays out. These ancient dynasties, armed with gene scryers and the arcane divinations of the Emperor's Tarot, strive to curb the wild tendencies of the Navigator gene. Theirs is a world where arranged marriages are not merely a matter of politics, but of survival, each union meticulously planned to strengthen bloodlines and stave off the creeping taint of mutation. In other words, a bunch of mutants playing matchmaker, using tarot cards and DNA tests to decide who gets to fuck who. It's like a game show of genetic roulette, all in the name of keeping their precious gift alive. The most venerable among these houses, hoarding wealth and power as fiercely as they do secrets, wield their resources to enforce a rigid control over their genetic legacies. This iron grip on lineage has fortified them against the fragility that gnaws at the foundations of lesser houses. Yet, in the darker corners of their ranks, some play a more perilous game, twisting their bloodlines in a reckless quest to spawn navigators of unmatched power, only to teeter on the brink of catastrophic collapse. Such genetic gamble often relegates those most afflicted to the hidden chambers of grand estates, or the sealed sanctuaries aboard starships. They cower from a world that had sooner burn them than look at them. And who can blame the masses? When your neighbor starts sprouting extra limbs, it's hard to keep the pitchforks at bay. The church boys sometimes get it in their heads to play exterminator. But that game doesn't last long. Those purges are often quelled with brutal swiftness by the ecclesiarchy itself, lest they draw the ire of the High Lords of Terror and jeopardize the vital services navigators provide. Hovering ever watchful above this fray is the Inquisition, whose agents tread with a mix of fear and resolve. They alone possess the authority to dismantle these powerful houses, to consign their scions to the black ships for judgment, actions undertaken with the utmost discretion to avoid upsetting the fragile equipoise that allows humanity to traverse the stars. To be born a navigator is to inherit a guaranteed disfigurement, the severity of which is a mirror to the purity or perversion of one's ancestral blood. Some lineages bear their curses with a strange pride, a collection of hereditary blights that mark their ancient claim to the navigator gene, while others suffer a chaotic spectrum of mutations, each generation a fresh horror show. The mutations of a navigator are not random but follow a ghastly pattern, a shared heritage of horror that varies wildly in its expression from one bloodline to another, from one hapless soul to the next. The bodily form of your typical navigator is stretched thin, their flesh pale as if leached of life itself. Monstrous deformities, such as scales, or abnormally vast vacant eyes that might lack irises altogether mark them as outsiders even among their own kind. Their hands and feet, sometimes webbed and unwieldy, are more suited to other, darker worlds, and baldness clings to them as surely as shadows cling to light. Now, not all mutations are created equal. Some poor bastards end up with needle teeth or bloat up like a corpse left in the sun. But others? They hit the genetic jackpot. Super strength, night vision, claws that could gut a space marine. The whims of the navigator gene are as fickle as the warp itself. Most navigators find themselves burdened with a litany of such aberrations over their unnaturally extended lifetimes. It is a rare and woeful spectacle to see a navigator bear the full pantheon of these mutations, and those most grotesquely affected might find themselves hidden away, or worse, extinguished at birth, by their own kin, eager to cleanse their lineage of weakness and avert the prying eyes of the Ordo Hereticus, or the envy of rival houses. At the core of every navigator lies the Warp Eye, a third ghastly orb that marks them as conduits between the mundane world and the chaos of the immaterium. This mutation, oftentimes a literal third eye upon the forehead, is more than a mere deformity. It is the very wellspring of their eldritch abilities. For some, the eye's potential is locked away behind bone until adolescence, when surgeons trepan the skull and install cybernetic shutters to harness its dreadful power. This third eye does far more than see. It connects, binding the navigator to the swirling tempest of the warp, allowing them to peer into its abyss and pilot starships through its convoluted storms. Initially, this eye may mimic an ordinary human eye, but it does not remain so. With age and exposure to the warp's unspeakable horrors, the eye darkens, the sclera and iris merging into a hardened, pitch-black sphere. In some severe cases, the eyelids wither away, leaving the eye a relentless, unblinking sentinel on the navigator's brow. Even severed from its host, the warp eye maintains its cursed link to the immaterium. To gaze into such a detached eye is not to invite death, but rather a gradual, gnawing madness, capable of unmooring the sanest minds into bouts of frenzy. Through this window, navigators do not simply witness the warp. They interact with it, piercing through material facades and even the veils of souls, reading the warp's capricious flows like others might read a book. The most adept among them can manipulate these currents subtly, sending ripples across the fabric of reality that echo in the physical universe. When the warp eye of a navigator gapes wide, it unveils a deadly spectacle. This ghastly orb, when fully revealed, can snuff out souls with its malevolent glare, rending spirit from flesh in a torment of blinding insanity. This dire power, though seldom wielded, serves as a grim testament to the perilous nature of the navigator's birthright. Beyond the ominous third eye, navigators often bear other, lesser mutations, each marking them as deviants from the human norm. Despite the shields of wealth and stature that protect them, their grotesque gifts inspire fear and mistrust among the masses of the Imperium. Navigators, thus marked by their mutations, shroud themselves in isolation. Draped in hoods and hidden in the shadows, they walk guarded by mercenaries, their dreaded gaze concealed from the public eye. This veiled existence mirrors the fraught ties that bind them to the wider society, indispensable yet ostracized, powerful yet perilous. The warp eye is whispered to harbor even stranger secrets as a navigator's communion with the warp deepens. Among the elite, it is said to grant visions of the future, a prophetic insight into the veiled paths of destiny. Yet, such esoteric abilities are closely guarded secrets, spoken of only in hushed tones, even among their own kind. Yet even these extraordinary seers are chained by their limitations. Their prowess in navigating the warp wanes with distance from the Astronomicon, that mighty psychic lighthouse fueled by the Emperor's will and the daily sacrifice of thousands of psychers. This frailty was starkly revealed during the Makarian Crusade, as conquest stuttered into darkness at the edges of the galaxy, where the light of the Astronomicon could not reach and navigators faltered, blind in the void. There are places they won't go, you know. The Eye of Terror looms in the void, a festering wound in reality that even the bravest navigator gives a wide berth. They'll add weeks, months to a journey, rather than skirt its edges, because they know what lurks there, in the shadows between stars. I've heard tales, whispered in the dark corners of starports and void stations, of navigators who thought themselves clever, who dared to dance too close to the fire. They're still out there, lost in the endless night, their screams echoing in the void for all eternity. The navigator gene, woven into the very sinew of those who bear it, stands as a pillar upon which the imperium of man teeters. In the absence of navigators, humanity's dreams of empire are reduced to ashes and stardust. Without their guidance, the distances between worlds would be measured not in light years, but in the screams of the damned. Ships devoid of a navigator's eye are chained to mere stutters through the warp, leaping only a few light years at a stretch, guided by the cold logic of cogitators. Such navigation teeters on the brink of disaster, for the slightest miscalculation can hurl a vessel and its souls into oblivion. To voyage across the cosmos without the arcane charts of ancient routes is to dance on the knife edge of madness and extinction, a folly only the desperate or the insane would entertain. But the navigators, oh, they know their worth. Bloodlines older than sin itself, some say. Others whisper that the emperor himself reached into the primordial soup of humanity and pulled them out, dripping and new-formed. Whatever the truth, these freaks have spent millennia building their little empires within the empire, growing fat on the desperation of a species that can't live without them. Their existence is steeped in the solemn rites of service and allegiance to their house. Their truest calling is found not amongst the fineries of their opulent quarters, but in the dimly lit sanctums of their ships, where they stare into the immaterium's abyss. Here, in these hallowed chambers, they wrestle with the raw chaos that skulks behind the fragile facade of reality, a duel of mind against the maelstrom. With each voyage, as navigators grow in power and poise, their perceptions sharpen, the childish sketches of horror maturing into clear, stark understanding. Their third eye, ever the filter, adapts, allowing them to face the warp's atrocities without falling prey to its madness. Despite their genetic fortifications against the void's nightmares, they are far from immune to its insidious decay. Prolonged exposure brands them with physical ruin and creeping madness, twisting some into living relics tethered to life by the cold machines of their sanctuaries. The novice nobility are not merely navigators, but wielders of arcane psychic abilities that flow from their storied bloodlines. These powers, esoteric and often misunderstood, elude the grasp of all but the deepest scholars and the navigators themselves. Unlike other psykers, they draw not on the warp's energies through rituals or tools, but are innately intertwined with its essence, their very existence a conduit for its power. Rumors swirl around their kind, tales of navigators who can doom with a look or warp time with a mere thought. While such stories surely outstrip the truth, they capture the dread and awe in which these beings are held. The spectrum of their abilities remains largely uncharted, with each navigator potentially harboring unique powers as varied as the stars. This mysterious arsenal only deepens the chasm between them and the humanity they serve, painting them as figures of myth more than flesh and blood. Nestled deep within the belly of Imperial warp-capable starships lies the Navigator's sanctum. It is a realm apart, a sphere of secrets and solitude, typically sprawling between 2 and 10 decks in diameter. These spheroid chambers are woven into the very skeleton of void ships during their birth in the Leviathan cradles of star docks. Often, these monumental orbs are wrought complete and sealed by the hand of the oath-bound navigator houses themselves, delivered to dock as finished enigmas, ready to be grafted onto new vessels. No common shipwright dares tamper with these sanctified globes. Such practices underline the profound exclusivity and enigma that shroud the navigators and their cloistered domains. Whispers echo through the corridors of time about ancient ships that have sliced through the void for centuries, their navigators ensconced within their sanctums, never once stepping beyond their consecrated confines. These self-sufficient realms draw sustenance from the ship itself, power, communication, and life support, all designed to serve the isolated denizens within. Navigators straddle a precarious line as both a mutant subspecies and a formidable political entity known as the Nobility. This guild, a congregation of all Navigator bloodlines, wields its influence like a dagger cloaked in velvet, exempt from many of the Empire's oppressive laws, yet ever under the weight of its gaze. Such is the might of the Nobility, that even the fearsome Inquisition treads with wary respect around its members. Not that they're untouchable, mind you. Catch one with their hand in the wrong cookie jar, treason, heresy, that sort of thing, and they'll find out quick how fragile their position really is. More often than not, though, it's their own kind that does the dirty work. Can't have the common folk getting too skittish about their precious mutant pilots, can we? Family is everything. They marry each other off like prized cattle, building alliances and nursing grudges that'd make your head spin. Within these powerful dynasties, branches of the same gnarled family tree might rule while others navigate, a division of labor vital to their survival and supremacy. In the shadowed halls of power, the Navigator clans hold sway, their might measured in the blood that flows through their veins. Like the great houses of old, they command legions, men sworn to their service. Thousands strong, these retainers, soldiers, and guards stand as a bulwark against the chaos that ever threatens to engulf them. The houses, bound by ancient oaths and the tangled web of marriage, fealty, and uneasy alliance, govern themselves with a heavy hand. Yet even in this world of self-rule, a higher power looms. The Paternova, High Master of the Nobility, watches from his lofty perch, ready to strike with ruthless efficiency should any clan's ambition or treachery threaten the delicate balance. Novators, those grim-faced leaders of individual houses, play a game as old as time. Their words speak of protection and unity, of shielding their kin from the grasping hands of the administratum, or the zealous fervor of the ecclesiarchy. Yet, their true, more vital duty lies in the stewardship of the Navigator gene, a treasure more valuable than any star system. The houses labor ceaselessly to birth and mold new generations of navigators. Their methods are cruel, their experiments perilous, for they seek to craft beings of unparalleled might, capable of guiding ships through the treacherous seas of the warp. In the annals of the Imperium, shrouded in mist and myth, lie tales of the Navigator houses. Some whisper of vaults deep beneath Terra's crust, where secrets older than the Emperor's own memories slumber in stasis. The Inquisition, ever watchful, ever hungry for knowledge, can but dream of the treasures hidden there. The Novators guard their sanctums with a ferocity that would make even the most determined servant of the Holy Ordos hesitate. Within the sprawling empire of the Imperium, the great houses of the Nobility stand as titans, their control over imperial shipping and interstellar commerce granting them a sovereign realm beyond the reach of both the Administratum and the Inquisition. Over millennia, this autonomy has allowed them to amass fortunes and influence that have weathered the ebb and flow of imperial power, their longevity surpassing that of nearly all other institutions. But power, as it often does, breeds conflict, Within the gilded halls and aboard ships that sail the tides of unreality, a great game unfolds. House turns against house, brother against sister. Blood spills on marble floors, and whispered plots echo through corridor mazes. Only the iron will of the Novators and the weight of tradition keep this powder keg from igniting, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of their society. Time, that relentless grindstone, has seen empires rise and fall, yet the Navigators endure. They were there when the Emperor, in all his radiant glory, set forth to conquer the stars. Without their third eye piercing the veil of madness, the Great Crusade would have been but a dream, stretching across millennia instead of centuries. And when Horus, the most favored son, turned his gaze to treachery, it was Navigator blood that guided his black ships through the storms of betrayal. Even as the galaxy burned and the Imperium trembled, the houses stood firm. They emerged from the great heresy not weakened, but tempered. For what is an empire without its roads? And what are the stars but waypoints on a map that only they can read? These houses, each distinct in its strength and composition, have branched and evolved from the ancient great families, the pioneers of the Navigator gene during the tumultuous days of the Great Crusade. The winds of fate have not been kind to all. Some have dwindled into the annals of history, forgotten or fallen. Others have turned renegade, casting aside imperial law to roam the stars under their own banners, while many have thrived, spreading like a shadow across the Imperium, establishing branches that clutch at distant stars. To catalogue each Navigator bloodline would be a task to rival counting the stars in the galaxy. Yet, in the grand theater of the cosmos, 4 great acts unfold, each played by a distinct cast. First, you've got your magisterial houses, old money, old blood. Their roots can be traced back to the Unification Wars. Wrapped in wealth and veiled in power, these dynasties hold vast tracts within the Navigators' Quarter on Terra. Their influence a beacon as far-reaching as the Astronomicons' glow. Bound by ancient rites and hoary tradition, they navigate the warp with a precision born of centuries of careful bloodline cultivation, their lineage stark against the common mutative ravages of warp travel. Then there's the nomadic houses. Imagine a bunch of space gypsies with a third eye, and you're halfway there. These restless bastards couldn't settle down if you nailed their feet to the floor. They have chosen to drift eternally through the stars. Their lives are bound to colossal star fleets, their heritage preserved in the belly of behemoth ships. Masters of the void, their navigators boast a prowess unmatched. Their intimate dance with the warp a ballet of cosmic proportions. Yet, their void-born isolation renders them strangers on any world, their souls forever married to the abyss. Then, there are the shrouded houses, cloaked in disgrace or misfortune, pushed to the fringes of the Imperium, where they cling to the tattered remnants of their former glory. Though diminished, these houses harbor secrets and skills of inordinate value, their navigators honed by necessity into cunning masters of the warp, their eyes sharper for the shadows they must pierce. And finally, we've got the renegades, the mad dogs of the Navigator world. They threw out the rulebook and decided to see just how far they could push their cursed genes. Sometimes it works out, and you get a navigator who can do things that'd make your eyes bleed. Other times? Well, let's just say there are things out there that make regular mutations look like a bad hair day. Hunted by the Paternova's decree, spurned by the Inquisition, They haunt the lawless reaches like the Coronis expanse, ever on the edge of oblivion. You think you know wealth? You think you know power? Let me tell you about the real players in this galaxy of ours. Since ancient times, the Navigator houses have woven its tendrils through the fabric of imperial society, accruing immense riches that are as obscure and tightly guarded as the darkest secrets of the warp. Each warp-capable starship in the Imperium's vast fleet depends not just on a lone navigator, but often on an entire cabal of these guides to navigate the treacherous currents of the Immaterium. It is from this indispensable service that the novice Nobility derives its boundless wealth, a treasure so vast that its true scope is known only to the Paternova. But it ain't just about the coin, oh no. These crafty bastards have got their tendrils in everything. Rogue traders, tech priests, even those walking slaughterhouses they call space marines. They're like a disease spreading through the Imperium, making themselves indispensable. They're not content with just sitting on their pile of gold. No, they are always looking for the next big score. They're the ones bankrolling those crazy rogue trader expeditions. This symbiosis serves the novice Nobility well. As rogue traders blaze new warp paths, navigators refine their own charts, enhancing their mastery over the Immaterium, and by extension, their grip on the galaxy. Despite their boundless wealth, the Navigator houses wield a type of power that slinks through the shadows, far from the ostentatious displays of might common to other imperial factions. Unlike the rogue traders with their proud fleets, or the vast merchant combines with their sprawling commercial empires, the navigators embed their influence deeply within myriad ventures, often concealing their involvement as if they were laying traps in the dark. The navigators seldom raise vast armies. They lean instead on the silent might of elite guards, household troops who are as fiercely loyal as they are deadly, often enhanced beyond the limits of ordinary human capacity through dark science and forbidden genetics. Yet, when the drums of war beat a foreboding rhythm, these dynasties can summon mercenary legions with coffers deep enough to challenge even an orbiting imperial defense force. What the Navigator houses do indulge in, however, are domains of such decadence that they would make even the most jaded noble gasp. Sprawling palaces, opulent estates, and labyrinthine pleasure gardens, each a masterwork of luxury and artistry, hidden from the common gaze of the Imperium's populace. Though hidden, they maintain grandiose, albeit more practical, halls of power within the galaxy's bustling starports and capitals, ensuring their presence is felt even in the heart of the Empire's ceaseless commerce. From the outside, even the simplest of the Navis Nobility's residences is a fortress of splendor, its walls soaring, cloaked in marble, and adorned with sculptures that could rival the gods. Spiring towers lance the heavens, and domes glitter like captive stars, but the true strength of these palaces lies concealed. Automated weapon turrets and near-impenetrable void shields lurk just out of sight, ensuring that the opulence within is matched only by the fortress that guards it. You think you know luxury? You ain't seen shit until you've laid eyes on a Navigator house's digs. These mutant lords live like the Emperor himself, only with more eyes and less common sense. Imagine halls vast as caverns, their walls sheathed in gold and platinum, their floors a mosaic of gems that would make a planetary governor weep with envy. Here, the air itself seems to shimmer with wealth, each breath worth more than a hive worker might earn in a lifetime. Tapestries woven from threads of precious metals and exotic animal fibers drape from ceilings so high they disappear into shadow, telling tales of conquest and glory that span millennia. Libraries stretch for miles, their shelves groaning under the weight of tomes older than some worlds. In gardens of unearthly splendor, flowers bloom that have never known the touch of a natural sun, their petals as delicate as a lover's sigh and as deadly as a serpent's kiss. Ballrooms large enough to host the populations of entire cities stand ready, their crystal chandeliers casting rainbows across polished floors that have never known the tread of a common boot. In dining halls that rival the great feasting chambers of myth, thousands may sup at tables laden with delicacies from 100 worlds. Here, wines flow that could ignite the passions of a statue, and meats are served whose provenance is best left unquestioned. Yet beneath this facade of limitless luxury, a darker truth lurks. Deep below, where the gilding gives way to bare rock and the perfumed air turns dank and foul, lie chambers of a different sort. Here, in dungeons warded by ancient technologies, dwell the secrets the Navigator houses would hide from all eyes, even their own. These are the failed experiments, the genetic dead ends, the price paid for millennia of pushing the boundaries of human flesh and spirit. Creatures that once might have been human writhe in cells of adamantium and despair. Some mule with mindless hunger, others scheme with terrifying intelligence, their mutations granting them powers that would be marveled at if they were not so horrifying. And what of the Navigators themselves, those lords and ladies of the warp who stride the upper halls like gods among mortals? Time and their curse inevitably take their toll. Those fortunate enough to retain their minds in their dotage retire to private suites, still wrapped in luxury, if somewhat faded. But for those whose sanity crumbles beneath the weight of years and warp exposure, a different fate awaits. They join their failed kin in the depths, monstrous reflections of the price of their power.